Hello, I'm Jeff Hullinger at the Atlanta History Center. So many of our notable citizens seem to come from Middle Georgia, be it politicians like Jimmy Carter, Sonny Perdue, or Sam Nunn, or musical titans like Little Richard, the Allman Brothers, or Otis Redding. Maybe it's something in the water. Chuck Leavell may have been born next door in Alabama, but moved to the middle of the state soon after high school. This musical minstrel of Macon would become one of the giants of Southern rock, playing with the Allman Brothers, Wet Willie, Dr. Hook, and a former Beatle, just to name a few. He's currently a touring member of the Rolling Stones. I sat down with the prominent pianist to talk about the musical journey of his life and why, after touring the world, he still calls his farm southeast of Macon home.
You could be excused if you don't recognize the face or even his name. But you would have had to have been living under a rock not to have heard Chuck Leavell's most noteworthy contribution to the pantheon of rock.
Here's the one I'm known for, so let's do that.
This boogie-woogie Macon maestro has put his indelible mark on some of the greatest rock and roll bands since the 70s, like the Allman Brothers and the Rolling Stones.
The first time you played Jessica as a young man, did you know that you had lightning?
I get the chance to reminisce with Leavell at Macon's iconic Capricorn recording studio, the room where this piano player's professional career took flight.
And so I sat here, while people were not around, and worked on that and came up with the entrance and just that. And then the just kind of a hello there, and then just took it from there, improvised.
Born in Birmingham, Alabama in 1952, Leavell's mother exposed Chuck to the music basics.
Mom was not a teacher or professional, but she played for family enjoyment, and she would get me up on the stool sometimes and just show me very simple things, sometimes as a form of babysitting at the tender young age of 7. I was loving the piano and learning it, and just really enjoying it. And I had this epiphany, as you say, that this was going to be my life's work.
He played the tuba in middle school and joined his first rock band at 13. At 16, he joined the Misfits in Tuscaloosa and quickly gained some local notoriety.
And you're starting to get noticed right away when you're in these bands. Are people, I'm going to use a sporting sort of metaphor in that when a kid can play quarterback, or he can play running back, or he's a good tennis player, or he's a fine golfer, people see it right away. They know there's something here that is not commonplace.
Well, yeah, I guess to a degree that was happening. Tuscaloosa, Alabama is where I grew up, and it was unbelievably a great area for musicians. There were really good musicians in Tuscaloosa. So, after my first band broke up, I had noticed some other musicians in the area, and I'd love to play with that guy. I'd love to play with that drummer, And those things came true, and so, as time went on, I found some nice fits.
Even in those early years, he plied his trade as a studio musician, playing with a variety of artists around Alabama, tasting his first bit of success on Freddie North's top 10 R&B hit single, She's All I Have Got, as an uncredited piano player. In 1969, he was coaxed to Macon to join Capricorn Studios as a studio player and producer. He briefly joined a series of bands like Sundown and with James Taylor's older brother, Alex Taylor. And when that fell apart, he joined Dr. John's band.
You were mentioned Dr. John as, you've always described that as your college education.
Yeah, education. I love Mac so much, and he was so sweet to me. It was a tough audition for him. the first night that we auditioned, it was not all that encouraging. It did not go that well, and Mac was stern. He was a taskmaster, you know. Man, y'all, I don't think y'all got this second line thing down. I don't know if it's gonna work, man. You know, y'all got to jump up into this game. And so I wanted that gig so bad, you know. I wanted it so bad. So I told the guys, I said, listen, let's go back, listen to some records. Let's really get down with this thing, and let's please this guy, because that's the only way we're gonna get the gig. And we did.
Gregg Allman heard his playing. It struck the right note for a solo album that he was putting together. It was during this time that the Allman Brothers Band were looking to pick up the pieces after Duane Allman was killed in a Macon motorcycle accident in 1971.
We had started to work on Gregg Allman's solo record, and then these jam sessions occurred that I mentioned, and then the meeting in Phil Walden's office where all the guys were there, and they asked me to join the band. And so we started that project in 1972. I think it was around April or May. And, you know, great memory for recording with the guys for the first time for me. And Jessica and Ramblin' Man, Come and Go Blues, all those were recorded here.
What's it like to live with that kind of history?
Well, you know, for me, everything happened so fast. The invitation to work on Gregg's record, that was the first step. In talking about the Allman Brothers Band, that was the first step. And then, as I mentioned, the jam sessions, and then all of a sudden they were asking me to be in the band. It was just, you know, all of that occurred within maybe 2 months' time. So yeah, I was trying to keep my head screwed on. Great opportunity. Don't blow it, Chuck. Don't blow it, you know. That was going through my head. And also contribute. You know, don't be a fly on the wall. I mean, get involved and try to make suggestions with the arrangements and be yourself, you know, and have a good time.
The new lineup started recording the Brothers and Sisters album in late 1972, spawning hits like Ramblin' Man.
Lord, I was born a rambling man.
And of course, Jessica. The album eventually topped the charts for 5 weeks.
So, you know, when the guys asked me to join, and the first step was going to be the recording of Brothers and Sisters, and Dickie presented that song to the band, and I thought, here's a little something maybe I can jump in on. And it was, as I said, it was just a beautiful vehicle for a piano player.
For the next 3 years, Chuck Leavell would tour and record a second album with the band, Win, Lose, or Draw.
The brothers broke up at least temporarily in 1976. We won't go into all the complicated reasons why, but so Lamar Williams, who was playing bass with the band, with the brothers, and of course Jamo, who was one of the founding members, one of the drummers, and I had been playing together as a trio for fun, you know, mainly at Jamo's house. So we had this little trio called We Three, played at people's parties, played at Jamo's house, listening to jazz, just trying to find our way. And when the brothers broke up, the three of us said, well, we can go on our merry way, or maybe we can make something out of this. So I felt like we needed a fourth member, and I called my friend Jimmy Knowles, great guitar player, played with me with Dr. John and with Alex Taylor, who was on Capricorn Records. And he fit in perfectly. And so we did that first record as a quartet, and we were sort of on our way.
Sea Level would go on and release 5 albums exploring jazz, funk, blues, and rock themes with a rotating cast of musicians. They achieved moderate success with hits like Living in a Dream from their album On the Edge.
Living in a dream.
It was also during this period he would meet his lifelong partner, Rose Lane White. She was a receptionist at Capricorn Studio. The two fell in love, and she brought Leavell to the family farm in nearby Twiggs County.
So when was the first time you were on this property walking? Do you remember?
Yes, Rose Lane and I had started dating, and the time came, she said, you got to come see the family.
What year are we talking about here? About 50 years ago? More than that?
53.
53.
Yeah. So let's see, that we had decided to get married, and she said, meet the family. I said, you know, you never told me anything about your family. She said, you'll see. And it turned out that they were all connected to the land. So come out, meet the family, and nervous, you know, hair down to here. Hippie boy meets the farming. I'm going to marry the farmer's daughter. Got to meet the farmer and the family. Fortunately, it all worked out. And they welcomed me with open arms.
When Rose Lane inherited the 111-acre property from her grandmother, known as Charlene Plantation, Lavelle would embark on a new journey, something that would go on to fill a different part of his soul.
My interest in forestry was really sparked when we were trying to decide, you know, we had inherited this land. What do we do with it that would be smart, that would be good, that would be enjoyable and productive? But then one day at the breakfast table, my brother-in-law said, you know, there's a 50-acre field down here we usually plant in a crop. If you're not going to do that, you might consider planting trees on it. Trees, huh? Well, that's kind of interesting, you know.
The farm work would at times be a full-time job, as Lavelle would ride the ups and downs of the music business, waiting for the next gig or project. That farm work would eventually be recognized in 1999.
You're a man who has garnered a lot of awards. I mean, this long at least, maybe a lot more than that. But National Tree Farmer of the Year is a unique award, and one I'm sure that has some emotional resonance for you too.
I'll just keep fooling them, Jeff. No, it truly was a great honor. And of course that included Rose Lane. You know, we were National Outstanding Tree Farmers of the Year. I think it was 1999. Boy, that's a while back now.
But it was during one of those lulls in 1981, when Lavelle's phone wasn't exactly ringing off the hook, that his musical life would be transformed again.
Bill Graham's office called, and there was this guy, Mick Double, and he said, was Chuck there? And I said, no, he's not here for the moment, you know. But he says, well, Bill wanted to have an audition for Chuck with the Rolling Stones.
The Stones eventually decided to go with a piano player the band had used before. Chuck was crushed at the news. The next year, music promoter Bill Graham suggested Lavelle's name again to the Stones. This time it stuck as he joined the band for their Tattoo You tour. He would eventually become an official member of the touring band.
This relationship now has gone on 40 plus years. When you entered it, did you think that it would have this sort of legs?
Not at all, no. And so, you know, when I came in, I thought, well, realistically, maybe 5 years out of this thing, you know, maybe two to five.
You're in your early 30s at this point, right?
I had just turned 30. And here we are 43 years later.
What's that experience been like for you? What has it meant for you as an artist?
Well, I'm flattered. It's a great opportunity. The guys are so fun. The music, I mean, come on, you know, how many great songs have Mick and Keith written? You know, Honky Tonk Women and Start Me Up and Can't Always Get What You Want, and it just goes on and on. Jumpin' Jack Flash, Satisfaction. The quality of the material is just so strong, and that's number one. That's what people keep coming back to.
Dealing with them, what is that like?
Well, it comes down, in my mind, to work ethic. You know, when we go into rehearsals, it's not, we're not playing around. You know, I mean, we're playing around musically, but we're not playing and goofing off. We want to get it right, man, you know, and I've been fortunate to kind of, I started taking notes back in '89 when we had the Steel Wheels tour, and the band decided to really go deep on the catalog. You know, let's look at this body of work and let's work up some songs that maybe are not necessarily known as hits, right? And so I started taking notes when we would do something like "Can't You Hear Me Knockin'," you know, which is a deep cut song, and others, and I would write out a chord chart and make notes. Did we have horns on this song? Do we have background vocals? What were they? Blah, blah, blah. Did we change the arrangement for any reason from the record? Sometimes we do that.
So when you're playing with them, you have these notebooks with you, right?
Well, here's the deal. It's like, okay, you're talking hundreds of songs, and you can't just remember everything. You know, hey, let's play this one. Oh, God, how does the bridge go? Where's the solo come in? So those notebooks are references for me. And if somebody says, "Oh, I can't remember," then I can say, "Well, hold on. Last time we did it, this is how we did
that's
it."
amazing.
And then it gets everybody on track.
That note-taking and attention to detail was noticed.
Which I kind of go, "Where's the book? Where's the book? Chuck, you must have this one. I remember doing this with," and he says, "That was 8 years ago." So yeah, but you must have got the notes. Come on, we're going to start from scratch. So Chuck and I go through the book of all the arrangements of how we did this song.
Mick Jagger would name Lavelle as the band's official director of music. When not with the Stones, he continues to perform solo and produce and work with other artists like Widespread Panic. And there's always work to do at the farm.
Is there anybody you have not played with that you'd like to play with at this point?
Oh man, yeah, Van Morrison. On the more upcoming side, I love the Tedeschi Trucks Band. The joy of my career, Jeff, has been dancing with all these different partners. It would have been fantastic if I had success with one artist or one band. But man, to play with Eric Clapton, George Harrison, the Allman Brothers, and David Gilmour, which was another fantastic phone call to get.
Do you ever see yourself retiring? Are you one of those retiring kind of guys?
Well, I love playing music. I see no end to that right now. But if there comes a time when it becomes impractical or uncomfortable for any reason, yeah, I'd be real happy to wake up here every day, go outdoors, walk in the woods, do some work, play with the dogs, any of that. So it's not like I think about, hey, I'm going to retire in 3 years, or 4 years.
Is it important to you that your name go on or your work or both, or do you not care?
I don't really think about that, Jeff. I'll be long gone, I won't know who's listening to what and whatever that is. I have no idea, that doesn't bother me. I mean, I'm here now.
Yeah.
I'm going to enjoy each and every day and live it one at a time. Whatever happens after Chuck's, got daisies growing on top of him.
Those damn Beatles.
It don't really matter to me.
Chuck Lavelle is a piano player, an Allman Brother, a Rolling Stone, a rock and roll icon. Always aware of his Southern roots, grounded in the red clay and dirt like one of his beloved Georgia pines.
Do you think this passion of the forests and trees and the environment sort of dovetails nicely into music? There's that sort of cerebral sort of mix that would energize you or spark you. Do you think they're all tied together?
Absolutely. When I'm out here, you can hear the sound of birds. The wind is not with us today, but you hear the sound of the wind through the pines, and that's a beautiful sound. And so that, I don't know, it's a balance thing. Yeah. You go out, you rock and roll and tour in big cities, big crowds, electric atmosphere. I get to come here, and this is what I have, and it's just like, yes.
Southern boys are different.
Yeah, there you go. I'll go with that.
Keeps Georgia rolling, rolling, rolling on my mind.
Lavelle will continue to tour with the Rolling Stones this year, as well as tickle the ivories for himself, headlining his own shows.